I'm Anthony Kapkan of Buildings IoT Canada magazine. Welcome to the Buildings IoT Forum session, Unpacking a Successful Multifamily Technology Platform from Integrations to the Ideal Business Model with Ted Maulucci. Before I continue, a very special thank you to our sponsors of the Buildings IoT Forum, WatchNet and Siemens. Thank you both for your support of this programming. Ted is the president of SmartONE Solutions, a company committed to advancing the digital living experience in communities. He has received several leadership and innovation awards, two CIPA Gold Awards of Excellence for application development in the real estate industry, and Private Sector Canadian CIO of the Year for his work on advancing smart and connected communities. I could go on, but I'm eager to hear Ted speak. Over to you, Ted.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ted Maulucci, and I'm going to be talking to you today about a journey and a solution and the approaches to implementing smart communities in multifamily residential. The best way to start this is to talk a little bit about my journey. It'll sound like my life story, but in the context, I think it'll give a good framework of how everything came about. I formerly was the CIO for a large real estate firm in Toronto. Worked there for my entire career and have now just started in my second job leading a smart community company. My initial inspiration started 15 years ago at a conference from Realcomm, and I first saw smart and connected buildings. And the right side of this slide deck is showing you that journey and how it evolved. So came back, got the inspiration 15 years ago. Let's put a network in the center of a building. We can transform what it's like to live in buildings. Really excited. Went back to the owners of my former company and said, this is what we have to do. This is the next generation. Smart buildings is where it was where it's at. And at that time, you have to think that 15 years ago, there was no smartphone even. Internet penetration was not 100%. So it took 15 years to figure this out. And I would say two sides of it. One was, what is the right technology? And then the other side is, what is the right business model? So following down inspiration and, at Tridel is a very large multifamily developer. As their CIO, I wrote and architected systems for their energy management company, property management companies, all the way to their law firm. So I developed a lot of background in software development around multifamily real estate. I started there as a construction superintendent, actually, because they wanted me to learn the business from the ground up. And the reason I share those different pieces is smart buildings is really about all of that. We influence, we touch the elements of hard construction, there's software development, there's conventional networking in there. So following down that right side, you see Tridel, when obviously was their CIO, worked there for almost 30 years. And below that, you see Comax, because in this journey of trying to figure out how to create a smart community, I looked at technologies from all over North America. So I looked at the iControls, the Crestrons, and all the rest of them to find that in North America, we really looked at smart home from a home perspective. My house, my thermostat, versus the approach that we're doing here where we want hundreds or thousands of homes all connected together on a common infrastructure. Because obviously the core of this thing is there's a network in the center of the building. Everybody's using the same app. And with this, we create platforms that enable. Now, to the right here, you're seeing the company Comax. So in my former role of CIO, finally convincing the owners of our company to approach a multifamily smart building, we did an RFP and ended up picking up Comax. And Comax is a company out of South Korea. And that was one of the first aha moments. In South Korea, they've always been living in high density. Single family homes aren't present, and to find that they were a technology savvy country and people, that they'd already been doing this for 20 years. So that first moment was finding out that, hey, let's take some Korean technology, let's bring it to North America and make it work. The story then was that at Tridel, we did our pilot project, which was a 700 unit building in downtown Toronto, which has now been running for about 2 years. And it was a scary pilot because the building was already sold. It was Wild West. Contracts weren't given. There was network integrations. There's all kinds of stuff to do. And we had to figure this out. And we did that with the company Comax. And the story was that when it became close to occupying, the entrepreneur representing Comax asked me to leave my role as a CIO and become an entrepreneur, which sounds a bit crazy. But in all the years of my career, I'd been building a lot of software, always with this intention and feeling that I wanted to sell it. I always had this feeling that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I share that because I know for sure there's people in that audience out there that, and I'm going to end this thing talking a little bit about the entrepreneur's journey, but I think there's a lot of us who think about, I want to build, I want to create, and I want to be an entrepreneur. So it was basically 3 years ago this past January, I went to the owners of our company and said, I want to be an entrepreneur. They supported me, stayed with them for 5 more months to help with transition. They contracted additional buildings with us. And then in those last 3 years, we started from hobbling along with a few buildings to this last year where things really took off. We're now deploying more than 50 buildings in over 15,000 homes with 25 developers, which I'm happy to say, not from a business perspective, that I'm happy to see that this innovation's finally come. There's a lot of people across North America who we've all been fighting for this for a long time. To see that they've been doing it for 20 years in Korea and to see that it's new in North America is actually not a good thing, because this technology, and once you get into it, you'll see that it enables so much for the future. Without this type of technology, it's very difficult to do security, sustainability, next generation services. Like, this is fundamental. Now at the bottom there, you see Bell. And the reason you see Bell, and you're going to see that come up in this conversation, is that that's part of the driver of this business model. 10 years ago, we realized that if we put a network in the middle of a building, we could give everybody internet access for about $20. And it wasn't even interesting. The owners at my company said, how is that possible? I said, do you think we pay $55 a month per desk for internet? No, we buy fiber from the street. We distribute it over our network. It's costing about $8. To find then that the telcos really didn't like the concept of people creating their own ISPs. And at that point, Rogers came forward and started to do bulk internet with Tridel. And now bulk internet has taken off across the city. And more than 50% of the buildings in Toronto right now are bulk internet buildings, meaning everybody's getting internet from the same company. But they lost sight of why were we pushing for internet from the same provider. It wasn't about internet. Internet is only a service on a network. If everybody gets internet from the same company, now we've effectively got a network that's paid for and managed in a building that we can leverage. And that's a key premise in this, and you're going to see that that's one of the business drivers in making this whole thing work. And this is why you see a Bell Canada down here, where now what we've done is we've created a new product class that's called a smart building. Just like you have a smart home, we now have a smart building, where instead of you paying for internet and everybody getting it from different companies, everybody gets internet from the same provider. They get a smart building service that includes gigabit internet, plus all the services that I'm going to speak about here. So let's dive into this on the left side to say, well, what does this smart building look like? And then from there, I'll start to answer some of the questions that are brought forth in the agenda items of this talk. So what does it look like? Everybody sees this at the top. There's a smart home. We have integrated thermostats, digital door locks, security, automated lighting control, scenes, everything you would typically see in the smart home. So what's different? Well, now we connect 700, or we connect thousands of these together on the same infrastructure. So to put that in perspective, it is very common in Korea to have 5,000 homes in 8 buildings, all connected into one network and all sharing this common backbone. Now, once everybody's sharing a common backbone within a building, we can do things. So example, here we see security cameras. Well, every building has IP cameras to allow security connected to NVRs. Well, now everybody can see the cameras we want them to see from their suite wall pad or from their mobile app. We can now put in automated parking controllers. So you're visiting me, I can type in your license plate. It'll allow you to do visitor parking without, creating permits and all the rest of that. Integrated parcel delivery, next generation lobby phones. What it looks like to live in this building is someone buzzes you from a lobby, you receive it on your phone, you receive it on your wall pad, you can let them in. Your alarm goes off, your phone rings, it rings at a guard station. That's the other big difference in a smart building. There's the concept of a guard station. There's the concept of property management. So now you can book a party room, launch a ticket, create different automations and workflows. The fundamental in this to me is really important. We all hear about smart cities, and everyone talks about all the whiz bang cool things that are going to happen because of smart cities. But few talk about what is the strategy to actually enable it. And that's really what this is. The smart building and smart community that I'm speaking about here, this is a mini smart city. And what is it founded on? It's founded on a common network that allows us to connect devices and sensors across a community, and everybody is now sharing a common software platform. Once you do those things, the world opens up to you. All of a sudden, you have new ways of creating sustainability options, security, assisted care for senior living, new generations of services like integrated car shares, smart car charging, storage. The world really opens up. So let me move forward here and start to answer some of the questions that are posed. The first one, and this was fundamental in this journey, is, well, what type of network should I use? Because there's multiple ways to approach this. And there's been an ongoing battle and a debate. Active network, passive network, hybrid approaches, low power wide area networks, or cellular networks. So let's just dive into this a little bit. An active network, that's your conventional network. And in a lot of cases, it's just what makes sense, because we know that at the end of the world, everything is PoE. Everything's copper. We need to convert to copper at a certain point. So why look at passive networks at all? Well, we all know that a passive network, well, the difference between an active and a passive network is an active network has components in it that use power. A passive network doesn't. So you have a fiber coming up a building. It goes through an optical splitter. So now I have one fiber gets converted into 16 or 32 fibers, versus an active switch where I have a fiber coming into a device and then splitting out to 24 or 48 copper connections. Again, the end devices, we all know that the boon to the intelligent building is the fact that we now have power over Ethernet. We now have resilient power within a building. So why do we even talk about passive at all? Well, we all know that in copper networks, you're limited to 100-meter limitations. Passive networks aren't. And I think a lot of the issues as you look over time, passive networks were not suited because they weren't copper at the end node. They didn't distribute power. The head ends to them, which are called OLTs or optical line terminals, they were very expensive. You'll now find that the passive optical vendors have actually come up with new solutions, and they're able to distribute power in more creative and interesting ways. So when I say the difference between an active network or a passive network, it does come down to it depends. What does the building look like? What are the distances you're trying to achieve? What is the overall goal? So I think it is worth a dive, and it is worth a business model and business case modeling as to which one suits best what you're doing, which is why you see me say hybrid. It's almost impossible to not use fiber because of the distances that you're trying to cover. And it's likely that you're going to probably end up with active switches at the end nodes. But again, everything here requires a deeper understanding and a deeper look. You see LPWA, which I think a lot of people would know as LoRaWAN networks, as one example. So these are low power, low frequency networks. And these are the reason why these make sense is, and you're probably going to have some variation of this, because we all know that 5 gigahertz, 2.4 gigahertz, some of the standard or Zigbee, Z-Wave, none of these protocols can travel very far. LoRaWAN networks are getting incredible distances and incredible penetrations because they're using such low frequencies. So you can put literally a gateway at the top of a building and connect a bunch of sensors all throughout the building. But then don't get excited too fast, because it's not meant to be able to transport payload. So it's great for a sensor like a leak sensor, something's on, something's off. So really, the message in this is there's different networks, understand your requirements. You're likely going to be using multiple forms and have to bring them together. You see cellular there. Now there's this movement towards using SIM-based technology to create virtual private networks across real estate. It sounds interesting. One of the challenges, though, is cellular coverage inside buildings is not great to start with. In some cases, some of these other methods are also adding complexity to what's a very simple network. If I look globally at what they're doing in Korea, we're finding that they're tending to use a hybrid approach, mostly active gear at the edges and pretty low cost stuff, because these buildings, the complexity of the networks are not complex, and you just need to keep it simple. And cost is a big driving factor, especially when you get into residential buildings. Now, obviously, I could spend a heck of a lot longer on networks, but that just gives you a quick overview. We have experimented and played with all of these over the years. So picking the right approach. Now, this is interesting because right now what you're seeing is two different worlds evolving. Some people are saying, you know what? You don't need a network in a building. Everything's cloud. And the cloud vendors love everything being cloud because they hook you. So here you can see one approach in a building is to say, I'm going to use this lock company, this thermostat company, this lighting control company, and each of those companies have their own cloud. And then what you do is you create your own cloud that depends on all of their clouds. And it gets pretty cloudy pretty quick. And the reason why you need to be cautious of an approach like this is that any cloud vendor could change something on you. And if they do, your system breaks. The other big danger in this is if there's no internet, the building doesn't work. The other big danger is if any of the clouds get hacked, your whole system gets hacked. So now you've got a much bigger attack surface. So again, everybody has been taught by the vendors to believe that cloud is the right way and everything should be cloud. I'm not going to be for a second here to say that cloud doesn't make sense, but I am going to say that it's typically a hybrid approach. It makes sense to have compute capacity at the edge as opposed to everything in the cloud. Internet is not as reliable as everyone would like it to be. And the other problem with this is that you don't want all these external dependencies. So the other approach is, well, let me put a localized network in a building. I'll have a server in the building that connects all the devices. The building is now completely localized and operates independently. So the local network-centric approach, instead of trying to create a bunch of clouds, hack the clouds together, or try to connect people's smart home pads through their Wi-Fi or through a SIM card, anytime you add that complexity, you're just looking for a problem. So you imagine you have 700 people in a building, everybody's connecting through Wi-Fi, someone changes their Wi-Fi router, who's going to go back up there and fix it? So what we have found is in our search globally that the most reliable way to do this is put the network in the building, secure it, make the building, allow the building to stand on its own. With or without internet, it runs. There's still a cloud. There has to be to back up, to allow mobile devices to communicate. But in this approach, here we have a standard home wall pad. It speaks directly to the leak detector, to the smoke detector, to the lighting control. It speaks directly. With or without internet, it'll work. You end up with a better experience. A building will keep running forever because it doesn't have the dependency on someone's cloud service being up, being locked down, etc. So this is something to demystify, because I know there's a lot of noise out there and a lot of people saying, oh, you want choice, just pick this cloud, pick that cloud, put it all together. And the thing is, it'll work at the point you deploy it, but the practicality and ability to work for more than 5 years is very limited because of the nature of how you're approaching this. Software. And I show this just to say that at the beginning, I spoke about the smart building strategy or the smart community strategy, and the fact that you can't do a smart community without a strategy. And the strategy is a network layer, a physical network layer that allows you to connect things, connect parking systems, package systems, or even defibrillators. Anything I want to connect from physical devices can be connected at an infrastructure level. The second component is this common software layer. If people aren't looking at the same interfaces, how do you do things? If people don't log into the same app and communicate in the same way, how do you do things? So here you can see as an example, here's my home, my community, my ability to do parking requests, call an elevator, do access control, book things. You need to have this common software layer. And here you can see a few more examples. I can program my thermostat remotely. Someone's visiting me, I can punch in a license plate. I think there's another place, especially in residential real estate, where you're going to see, a big movement towards automated license plate reading, package control systems. And then to do that, you really want to create this single integrated experience. People don't want to have to keep a package app up, a parking app up, their smart home app up. You really want this to be a central single place. And the reason it makes sense then is every time we add a new service or component to this thing, it just gets stronger. The more things that you can access from one spot, the more powerful it becomes. And here again, guest parking. And then here's the management dashboard. And this is scalable. So right now it's, what are the messages for my community? Here's my parking requests and I can filter them. Are there package receipts, amenities? And now we're adding more and more cards as we build. Again, this is a platform approach. We're now building ones for smart health and all types of different services, all being deployed through the same framework. So what's the business model? And I spoke to this at the beginning. And in the 15 years of fighting this, we obviously tried everything. At the beginning, my pitch was, I'm going to save energy. 40% of the cost of a building is saving energy. And I hit resistance. How can you prove that? I'm going to save concierge time because now I can have 3 buildings. I can make one concierge manage 3 buildings. I'm going to save staff time. The same thing. How can you prove that? One of the challenges when you're dealing with innovation is, how do you prove if it hasn't been done before? And then how do you nudge people along? And the way it ended up selling was, we're going to create a better resident experience. And the main driver in the business case ended up being, we're going to leverage bulk internet. Everybody's going to get internet from the same provider. That will lower the cost of internet. But now we can charge internet at a reasonable street price. We now have a delta of money that we can use that helps us be able to pay for this thing. So right now we are doing that with the major telcos in the city. We're deploying a smart building that includes gigabit internet plus everything that you see here for about the same price as regular internet. And you can see how that drives. And now that the systems are actually installed and we're being deployed, now we're seeing this flourishing of all the other things. Well, if I put leak detection in, can I get an insurance savings? Yeah, you likely can. I never sold it hard at the beginning because someone would say, how do you prove that? Or can I save energy? Well, yeah, you can, because now they're all connected and we're starting to see ways that that happens. So what's happened now is with the building of this infrastructure and with this strategy, we're starting to see the payoffs. We're starting to see these new services and new ways of living. So one last is 5G. And I love to talk about this topic because everybody talks about this topic. And everybody talks about 5G as it's this one glorious transmitter at the top of the world and it's going to solve all of our issues. And it's magical, and builders are like, oh, and what about 5G? And I'm like, well, what about 5G? Do you really understand what it is and why it was created? And 5G was created to create low latency, higher payload delivery, which sounds good. Now, the problem with that is it's using higher frequencies. Because it's using higher frequencies, it's less likely to penetrate a building. So as 5G proliferates, what it ends up meaning is we need twice the amount of infrastructure to support its delivery. And the delivery of cellular in buildings is actually going to get worse. 5G is actually going to prompt more in-building systems to deliver cellular coverage. I mean, I always use the example of, would you live in a building or would you live in a home where your cell phone doesn't work? Probably not. So I think you're going to end up seeing that in multifamily residential, a greater need for a strategy about cellular coverage within the walls. That said, we are also looking at, there are some pretty interesting technologies out there where you can create a virtual private network using SIM-based technology. And that too has its place. That can we create now smart communities that are more distributed? So let's say we have a multifamily residential home that's spread out over 100 acres and we want to create a virtual private network. Well, we're not going to do that with an active network. We could do it with a passive network, or when we get into retrofits, cellular will play a role in this. So, and that's not necessarily 5G, I'm talking in general. So 5G is a great thing, and I'm not trying to push down on that. The challenge that you face in this, and a lot of people don't see it, is people don't want to pay more for their cellular coverage and their cell service, but deploying something like 5G is huge investments. And they're great investments for a country like Canada, but someone has to pay for them. The challenge being that Canada has got a low population for a very large land mass, making the economics very challenging. So I said I would end and talk about entrepreneurship. And it was an interesting journey to go from the stability of being a CIO to becoming the president of a startup, especially at this portion, at this age in my life. I do see an advantage of doing this when you're much older, in the sense that you at least understand some of the basics. You understand accounting systems, you understand compliance, you understand a lot of the stuff you need just to make a business go. But mentally, it's a completely different thing. And this is why I show this slide, which is face everything and rise. It's an emotional roller coaster. One day you think you're on top of the world, the next day you don't think you're going to stay in business. When you're working for a company, you have different types of pressure where, you know, I now go to CIO summits and things, and I cringe when I hear I'm trying to convince the owners to do this and they won't do this, and how do I enact change in my company, to this where it's like, I'd say it's like riding a rodeo bull. And then someone said to me, well, that's not a good analogy because you only last 25 seconds. And I think that's the truth of most entrepreneurs. You only last 25 seconds. So how do you ride the bull for a couple of years and actually see it through? And this fear thing is one that really stuck with me, which is face everything and rise, which is take every challenge that comes and look at it as an opportunity to grow and to overcome. And I think unless you do that, you can't be successful. And I leave with this one because this, I think, is one of the more powerful, because obviously, as you know, in my past career, developed friendships and connections with so many different people. And over the years, I always heard them. And I was one of those people too that said, you know, I want to start my own business. I'm working on this problem. I have this idea. And the biggest thing that I could say came to me, I guess a couple things came to me in these last 3 years. The one is the understanding that I don't really need anything. The understanding, I think you have to lose any sense that you're trying to earn money. Money becomes irrelevant, not because you have it, you don't, but you have to realize that it's completely irrelevant in what you're doing. Because I think if you become greed focused and focus on that, you'll never be successful. But the reason I show this slide is burn the boats as you enter the island and you will take the island. And I know a lot of you would know this from Tony Robbins saying, if you want to take the island, burn the boats. Well, what does that mean? You can't be an entrepreneur doing it part-time. You can't say, I have this cool idea and I'm going to do this on the side. If you want to make it work, you have to commit. But when you commit, it goes back to the previous slide of fear. You need to be able to dig deep, right? You need to know that there's no way backwards and you only have a way forward. So at the end of it all, I think entrepreneurship is something that's been glorified, and it isn't the glorified. I'm not going to say that it's the wrong thing. I'm totally happy that I'm in this path, totally happy with what I'm doing, but I fully realize after going down this far that this is not for everyone. This is for people who want to take a beating and stand up again and have a high probability of not having it work in the end. And that may be a little dramatic, because the counter side of that is you can actually create something meaningful. So at SmartONE, we've been funded by the federal and provincial government. We're being installed in research labs across the country. We've got top machine learning and AI experts working with us now to create next generation services to help people age in place. To go back, this started as a mission, and the mission is really to get this technology in buildings, because we need this technology in buildings. And this technology is what's going to enable Canada to flourish in the future. It's going to allow us to do the things like allow people to stay at home longer, find new ways to conserve energy, create more secure communities, create greater convenience for the people that live in them. So for all the other people out there, and there's a lot of them, and some of the other speakers, we've all known each other a long time, and we've all been fighting the same battle for a long time. And I'm thankful to say that after all those years and of all those people that's fighting, I'm happy to say that it's happening and it's a good thing. So with that, hopefully you found that useful. It's a lot to cover in a very short amount of time, but thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Ted. That was a fantastic way to end. You brought up something interesting there at the end in terms of aging in place. And also earlier, much earlier in the presentation, you had talked about how having a smart building can also help in assisted care for senior living. Can you give some examples of how technology and some of the things that we have today, and perhaps some of the things you're working on, can actually help us age in place or help assisted care living facilities?
Yeah, and there's a few that we're working on right now, and then obviously a roadmap to the future. But the basic principle of this is what we've done is created what we call a black box. And the black box, what it does is it takes event series data of the home. When did a light switch go on? When did a door open? Anything. And what we do is we unify that. So there's a data dictionary. So now we know all the activities of the home from different systems, from different devices. It's all sitting in one spot. Now, what the professors and the team we have across Canada that are doing is they're now running machine learning and AI against those data sets. So what are the possibilities? One of the first ones we're doing right now is in senior homes or independent living, they have a button in the house you're supposed to push every day to say, I'm here, I'm alive. It's a morbid way to say it, but they have this button which is called resident check. Well, now we're automating the resident check button. You don't need to push a button. We can tell you turn on the bathroom light, you open the door, etc. And we're using the property management tools and workflow automations. So let's say my father lived in a rental and I want to know he's okay. I can subscribe to a service. If by 12 o'clock nothing has happened within the suite, my father's going to receive a notification on his phone that says, are you okay? If he doesn't acknowledge it, I'll get a message on my phone and say, there's been no activity at your father's home. Do you want to check on him? So very simple. Now, some of the other ones that we're working on are fall detection. So fall detection, everybody goes, well, that's not new. Well, the problem with fall detection is the sensors are so sensitive that they'll go off so many times that they're accurate, but they're 99% of the time wrong and false positive. So now what researchers are doing is using data from the suite to be able to correlate with fall data. So as an example, motion sensors are going off. We can tell there's motion in the home. A fall detector goes off. We don't see any activity in the suite anymore. Well, now we know that that's an emergency. We ring the guard station. We call every single cell phone. Fall detector went off. There's no motion. To the counter of that would be fall detector goes off. We saw a light switch flip on. We know someone's in the home, and it's a different situation. To go a little bit edgier, there's cardiac researchers at the University of Toronto that know if you weigh yourself at the same time every day, if they notice that your weight increases abnormally, there's a very high predictor that you're going to have a heart attack. So they've attached an IP scale to the system. And when you wake up in the morning, if you don't weigh yourself by 8 o'clock, it tells you on your phone you didn't weigh yourself yet, encouraging you to do it. As soon as you weigh yourself, it runs analytics against that. And now can, if based on that state, decide what to do, that it's normal, cautionary, or maybe it's an emergency, and again, they'll ring a guard station. The idea being is that once we take and aggregate the IoT data, unify it through a data dictionary, and run analytics, we can do anything we want. We can do all types of different services, not just around assisted care, but also around security and sustainability.
That's absolutely amazing. I never would have known some of this research is going on. Now, tell me, uh, you mentioned several times, mostly at the start of the presentation, just how much more advanced South Korea was with its infrastructure as compared to North America. If you could look at the situation now, are we still 20 years behind? Are we starting to catch up, or what's the newest and coolest coming out of South Korea?
We're 20 years behind in one respect. From a technical level, integrated devices, they absorb technology way faster than us. They're doing far more than us. But the place where I don't want us to be discouraged is from a software perspective, they're not doing the same things as us. So some of the research that I'm talking was just discussing with, they're not really doing that yet, or they're just starting, they're in the same plane as us. So I think they're very good at, absorbing things like license plate readers, advanced access control, a lot of those pieces, but they're not as experiential in the software design and how you actually use the stuff, which is why it's an interesting partnership between SmartONE and Comax out of Korea. We tend to bring more of a softer side to what they do. They've never even thought of some of the things that we're doing. Example, smart car charging we're doing with Leviton. You can book a car charger and get billed for it based on usage, right? They're not doing those things yet. So I always want to be cautiously optimistic. There's always been this disappointment in the fact that, North America, we're not adopting technology as much, and that's true. I mean, even if you look at Europe, in Europe, they're way ahead of us in terms of sustainability. But a lot of the reason for that is that, it's too cheap here. Energy is too cheap, and a lot of people may want to argue that. But the European world is different than our world, which is why I think a lot of times you can benefit by looking at different parts of the world that are challenged in different ways and taking those innovations back to your own country.
Excellent insights. Ted, I have a strong suspicion that you and I could go on for much longer, but I should wrap it up here. And thank you so much for taking the time to not only share what you've learned, but also the journey that you've been on, and giving us some glimpses in terms of where that journey is taking you and the rest of us along with you. Thanks again, Ted.